بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. So inshallah we will continue from where we left off last week. So just a quick recap, and without going into the details of what we spoke about last week, we of course introduced the Seerah, we defined the Seerah, we mentioned a few benefits of why it is important for us as Muslims to learn the Seerah. We also spoke about the sources of the Seerah. Where do we learn our Seerah from? The different books of Seerah, and of course, not to mention the Quran and the Sunnah. And as well, we started by defining Arabia. What is Arabia? Both physically as a location, what is Arabia? And who are the Arabs originally? And we said, we spoke the hard truth that pretty much everyone here in the room who is an Arab is not actually an Arab. Nobody here is originally, the majority of Arab today are not actually linked to original Arabs. And we broke down who are the Arabs. We mentioned Qahtan, we mentioned Adnan, and all the different tribes, and how they scattered all across Arabia. So today, inshallah, before once again we start into the Seerah, the books of Seerah, they mention what was happening in the world before Islam came. Or more specifically, what were the religions of the world? What was the religious status of the world before the coming of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? And the reason this is important to know is because in order for you to appreciate Islam, you need to have an understanding of what was happening before Islam, so that you have a complete image of before, during, after. What does Islam come to change? This is important. So this is why it is important for us to understand pre-Islam and to understand Jahiliyyah. Now, Allah Azza wa Jal, He mentions in the Quran, وَإِن مِّنْ أُمَّةٍ إِلَّا خَلَا فِيهَا نَذِيرٌ. Every single ummah, Allah has sent a prophet to. And we said last week that for the Arabs specifically, Allah sent for them Prophet Ibrahim and his son Ismail alayhim as-salam. And this is why Allah always references in the Quran, and Allah always says, Abikum Ibrahim, Millata Abikum Ibrahim. This is the religion of your forefather Ibrahim alayhi salam. And so what did Ibrahim do? We spoke a little bit about his backstory last week, but just to mention a few practices that Ibrahim alayhi salam, he started. And this is, we're talking more than 1,000 years before Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Of the things that he did is he established Mecca as a haram. He established Mecca as a sacred area, a sacred city. Now, why is haram called haram? Like haram, what is haram? Because haram, isn't it coming from the same word haram? And what does haram mean? Haram means forbidden. So haram is called haram because certain things which are normally allowed outside of the haram are forbidden inside. There are certain rules which are forbidden inside the area of the haram, which today is Mecca and Medina, and they are allowed in other places. So for example, hunting. Here in Calgary, you see a deer, you can, mashallah, grab the rifle, just shoot it down, and do a dhabh, and eat some deer meat. Right? You can't do that in Mecca. You can't do that in Mecca. You cannot even pluck a leaf from the tree in Mecca. That is not allowed. Because وَمَنْ دَخَلَهُ كَانَ آمِنًا. It is a safe sanctuary for all living creatures. It's not only for human beings. And this is why Ibn Abbas would narrate that, in their days, a person would see the murderer of his own father right in front of him in the Kaaba making tawaf, and he would not touch a hair on his skin because they realized we are in haram. And even the people of Jahiliyyah, Quraysh and pre-Quraysh, they respected overall the rules of the haram. Where did the haram and the rules of the haram come from? This is what Ibrahim alayhi salam established. He also instituted, and of course all of this by the command of Allah Azza wa Jal, he instituted what we call al-ashhur al-hurum, the 4 sacred months. These specific months are months in which there has to be peace, there cannot be any warfare. No bloodshed is allowed in this month, regardless of what the political situation is, regardless of what's happening between the tribes. You have to stop in these months. And once again, these are rules that generally the Arabs, to a certain extent, they respected these rules. And as a result of this, by the way, many economies boosted. Many economies boosted because they were forced to stop fighting for these 4 months, and instead they would start trading with each other, buying and selling. So this helped some of the economies. And he also established Hajj, along with all of the rituals of Hajj. So this includes tawaf, this includes sa'i, this includes al-hadi, the udhiyah that you give. They had this during Hajj. They would go to Arafat, they would go to Muzdalifah, they had many of the Hajj rites which are found today. But of course, Islam came and redefined some things. But this was all found in the days of Jahiliyyah. And the Arabs knew these rules, and for the most part, they respected it. Now, I am here telling you that Ibrahim alayhi salam was sent to the Arabs, and Ibrahim alayhi salam, he preached Tawheed, he called people to Allah, he established the Hajj, right? So how come when we go and we read about the Seerah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and we start from Quraysh, we hear, oh, Quraysh used to worship idols. Yani we're saying Ibrahim alayhi salam came with the message of Tawheed. Where did paganism come from? Where did the whole concept of worshipping idols come from? It's a valid question, and it's important for us to discuss this. And in fact, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he told us exactly when and where and how idolatry began. And Ibn Ishaq, he narrates this from Abdullah bin Abi Bakr radiyallahu anhu, that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, and this hadith is in Sahih Muslim, رَأَيْتُ عَمْرُ بْنُ لَحَيْ يُجَرُّ قُصْبَهُ فِي النَّارِ. I saw Amr ibn Luhay, this man, Amr ibn Luhay al-Khuza'i, I saw him wandering around in Jahannam, and his intestines are falling out. It's a very disgusting and obviously a very severe punishment. And in a different narration, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he explained why did he have this punishment, because he says, إِنَّهُ كَانَ أَوَّلَ مَنْ غَيَّرَ دِينَ إِسْمَاعِيل. He was the first to modify the religion of Ismail. And notice the wording here, the religion of Ismail, meaning there was a religion, but then they modified it. He came and he changed it. This man, Amr ibn Luhay. He was also the first person to introduce many types of superstitions. Everyone here knows what a superstition is, right? You know what they say, like if a black cat crosses the road, that's a bad luck, right? It's a superstition. Okay? He was amongst the first to introduce superstitions. In the same hadith that I just mentioned, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, إِنَّهُ كَانَ أَوَّلَ مَنْ غَيَّرَ دِينَ إِسْمَاعِيل فَنَصَبَ الْأَوْثَانِ. He put out the idols. وَبَحَرَ الْبَحِيرَ وَسَيَّبَ السَّائِبَ وَوَصَلَ الْوَصِيلَةَ وَحَمَى الْحَامَةَ. And Allah Azza wa Jal, he says in the Quran, ما جعل الله من بحيرة ولا سائبة ولا وصيلة ولا حام. This is a verse in Surah Al-Ma'idah. What does this mean? What are these words? Al-Bahira, Wasaiba, Wasila, Waham. These are all very complicated superstitions that they came with. And I wrote some of them here. I couldn't write all of them. They're very, very weird and complicated. You want to see all of them? Go open the books. But like, for example, they have the superstition. So if they have this camel, and this camel gives birth to 10 female offsprings, without giving birth to any male offspring. This is a sa'iba, by the way. They don't ride that camel, and they don't milk that camel, and they do not use the hair of that camel. And if that same camel gives birth to any more female camels, they cut off the ears. Very strange superstitions. And the same thing with wasila and hama, the same thing. They had very strange superstitions. It is mentioned that Amr ibn Luhay was the one who introduced these concepts. So, what's his story? How did he actually manage to bring in the idols? His story is narrated by Ibn Hisham. And it is mentioned that Amr ibn Luhay, he was he was in Mecca at the time. He was a well-known leader in Mecca. He traveled to Syria, and at that time, Syria had a civilization, a very powerful civilization. It's an ancient civilization that is referred to as the Amaliq, or in English, I believe they call it the Amalekites. And they're a civilization of very tall people, and these are people who had civilization, they had structure, they had architecture, they had culture, language, and they were very powerful. They were undefeated. In comparison, the Arabs, they neither had no civilization, no nothing compared to this. So Amr saw this, and he found them worshipping idols. There were no idols in Mecca at the time, but he saw them worshipping idols there. So Amr asked them, "What are these idols that you are worshipping?" And so they told him, "These idols are our source of power. We seek, we make dua to our idols whenever we are hungry, and they grant us the food. Whenever there's a drought, we call out to the idols, and they grant us the rain. Whenever there's a war going on and we need to attack or defend, we call out to our idols, and they grant us our power," and so on. We pray to our idols for everything. So Amr, he was very impressed by what he saw. And Amr asked them, "أفلا تعطوني منها صنما فأسير بها إلى أرض العرب فيعبدوه?" Can you just give me one idol? Let me bring it back home to the Arabs, so that the Arabs can worship them. And so they gifted him an idol by the name of Hubal. Hubal. And he brought this idol Hubal back to Mecca, and he placed it right in front of the Kaaba. And Hubal was the first idol to be worshipped in Arabia. And for the most part, Hubal continued to be the most significant idol. And this is why many hundreds of years later, when the Battle of Uhud took place, and when the Quraysh thought that they had killed Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what did Abu Sufyan say? "U'lu Hubal." Victory and praises to Hubal. So Hubal existed even at the time of Quraysh, but it started from the time of Amr ibn Luhay al-Khuza'i. Amr also, not only did he bring idol worshipping, but he also changed some of the teachings of Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam. As I mentioned at the beginning, Ibrahim alayhi salam, he established Hajj. And what comes with Hajj, naturally? لبيك اللهم لبيك لبيك لا شريك لك لبيك إن الحمد والنعمة لك والملك. Right? The talbiyah. So Amr actually changed the talbiyah. Because when you say لبيك اللهم لبيك, what are you saying? لبيك اللهم لبيك, you're saying, "Here I am, O Allah, I am responding to your call." Which call? The call of Ibrahim alayhi salam, when he made the call to mankind, when there was nobody there, Mecca was completely empty, and he called out to people, "Come and do Hajj." And Allah made his sound resonate and vibrate throughout the entire world. Every year the call of Ibrahim is made, "Come and do Hajj." And the way that the Hujjaj approach the ritual of Hajj, لبيك اللهم لبيك. But what do they say in the talbiyah? لبيك لا شريك لك لبيك. I am responding to you, O Allah, and I testify you have no partners. Now this is a problem for Amr. Why? Because he brought Hubal. He brought Hubal. So now there is, astaghfirullah, there is a partner. So he changed it, and this is found in Sahih Muslim. He changed it, لبيك اللهم لبيك, this is fine. لبيك لا شريك, so far so good, إلا. Now there's a problem. He added illa, except. لا شريك لك إلا شريكا هو لك تملكه وهو لك. Like, there is no partner with you, O Allah, except for one partner. تملكه وهو لك. Like, he belongs to you and you control him. Like, essentially, you have partners, but you're, oh Allah, you're the big boss. And that's essentially what Amr was saying. Similar to how, if you read the Greek and Roman mythologies, you know, they have the god Zeus and Jupiter, and I don't know what the names, and then there's the smaller gods, and then there are bigger gods. Yani, this is, in a way, the similar image of what Amr ibn Luhay he did. Ibn Hisham, he also mentions, at this time, different tribes resurrected the first idols to ever be worshipped on the face of the earth, which the same idols which the Quran tells us about, the idols of Prophet Nuh alayhi salam. So what Allah says in the Quran, لا تذرن آلهتكم ولا تذرن ودا ولا سواعا ولا يغوث ويعوق ونسرا. 5 idols. These were the 5 original idols, the first idols to ever be worshipped on earth. Somehow, they actually got resurrected in this time. And they scattered amongst different tribes, in addition to some other big idols. So, for example, there was the idol of Umaynas, which was in the tribe of Khawlan. There was the idol of Sa'd, which was in the tribe of Banu Milkan ibn Kinana. There is the idols Isaf and Na'ila. Isaf and Na'ila, which were in Mecca, and they have a very disgusting backstory, by the way, which the books of Seerah they mention. Na'ila and Isaf, they were idols who were actually placed on Safa and Marwa. They were placed on Safa and Marwa, and whenever Quraysh would do sa'i, they would actually go and touch the idol in Safa, and they would go to Marwa, and they would touch the idol in Marwa. And so when the Muslims took over, they felt very awkward to do sa'i. Why? Because they thought that sa'i was a commemoration of these 2 idols, Na'ila and Isaf. And until then, Allah revealed the verse, the famous verse in Surah Al-Baqarah, Inna Safa wal Marwa min sha'airillah, that, like, look, Safa and Marwa are the signs from Allah. These have always been from the rituals of Allah way before Na'ila and Isaf. Way before Na'ila and Isaf, there is no sin in doing tawaf, no sin in doing sa'i between these 2 mountains. Now, what's the story of these 2 idols? And this is the backstory that is narrated by Aisha radiallahu anha. She says that since we were kids, we would hear about the stories of Na'ila and Isaf. They were two lovers from the tribe of Jurhum, and they could not find a place to be intimate together, and the only place that they found to be intimate was inside the Kaaba. The only place they found. And so they did their intimacy, wal-'iyadhu billah, inside the Kaaba, and as a punishment, Allah destroyed them, and Allah petrified them right then and there, as a form of punishment. But Quraysh, they took it as a miracle. So they took the idols, these statues, and they put one in Safa and one in Marwa as a form of, because they thought this is a sign from Allah Azza wa Jalla. SubhanAllah. And there's other idols as well. There's idols that the Quran mentions. There's the idol of Al-Lat. Al-Lat was found in the city of Ta'if. There is the idol of Al-Uzza. Uzza was also between Banu Kinana and Quraysh. There is also Manat. Manat was actually found in the tribes of Al-Aws wal-Khazraj. There is also more as well. There is the idol of Fils, which was found in the tribe of Tai, the same tribe of Hatam al-Ta'i. And there's other, we don't need to keep mentioning them. Now, subhanAllah, how did they get to know the names of Wad and Suwa and Yaghuth and Ya'uth and Ya'uq and Nasr? Because these are idols, like I said, these are tribes, idols from the time of Nuh alayhi salam. And Nuh alayhi salam, between them and Quraysh, is like, you're talking thousands and thousands of years. How did they know the names? Allahu alam. Some scholars mention that it is because of also Amr ibn Luhay. that shaitan inspired him through a dream or through wahi, because shaitan can give wahi, by the way. Shaitan, so just like Jibreel gives wahi, shaitan can give wahi. This is found in the Quran. Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, وَإِنَّ الشَّيَاطِينَ لَيُوحُونَ إِلَىٰ أَوْلِيَائِهِمْ لِيُجَادِلُوكُم. Shaitan gives wahi to their followers so that they can argue with you. So, Allahu Alam, we're never going to find out whether this is true or not, but either way, these tribes were now resurrected and they were found in Arabia. Now, when did Amr ibn Luhay live? This is also one of the things that is not very clear, because you have to understand something. The Arabs back then, they did not care to record dates. Arabs, they did not record dates. They didn't have a calendar. They didn't have the Gregorian calendar until Umar al-Khattab established the Hijri calendar, but this was way later. And the way that they would record dates is through major events. So for example, Amul Fil, the year of the elephant. Why is it called the year of the elephant? Because a significant major event took place on this year. So they would use it as a reference point. So they would say, okay, such and such a person, he was born 5 years after Amul Fil. They don't actually have a date. They don't actually have a year. So back to the question, when did Amr live? Again, there's no clear answer to this, but some scholars, I found that they mentioned that he was alive during the generation of Fihr, and Fihr is one of the ancestors of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. So perhaps 400 to 500 years before Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. We're talking about, this is just an estimate. Now, before we move on, how can one man, Amr ibn Luhay, single-handedly change the religion of Ibrahim and Ismail, since there were already practices of Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam? And how come the people just quickly accepted what Amr ibn Luhay brought in? Like he just told them, come, here's an idol, go worship the idol, and people listen to him and they worship. How come it was this easy for him to change the religion? There are two main factors for this. Well, first of all, notice that Amr had some sort of inferiority complex towards the Amariq, the civilization that was in Syria, because they were powerful. They had history, they had architecture, they had books, they had large buildings, they had structures, and they were undefeated. And we have to really listen and benefit from this. The whole world looked up to them. And so Amr assumed, because they were, mashallah, advanced, they had the technology, they had the civilization, they had the education, that means they are correct in everything that they do. And we have to be very careful of falling into the mindset of Amr ibn Luhay. Simply because a nation is powerful, and this is I'm talking about today, simply because a nation is powerful, just because a country has advanced military technologies and power, does not mean that that nation has the correct ethics and the correct morals. This is very important. A better nation is not defined by its materialistic wealth and their technological advancements. So even then, why would people, so once Amr ibn Luhay, okay, he was influenced. He brought back the idol. How come the people accepted it? This is now the second factor. Amr was the chief of a tribe called Khuza'a. So last week we mentioned the custodians of the Kaaba at the time was a tribe called Jurhum. And Ismail married into the tribe of Jurhum. We mentioned that last week. So for a period of time, the tribe of Jurhum actually was defeated and expelled outside of Mecca. And the tribe who became in charge of Mecca was a tribe called Khuza'a. This was Khuza'a. Until, of course, later in the future, we're probably going to talk about this more next week, inshallah. But one of the ancestors of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, his name is Qusay. He came back and he reconquered Mecca and he brought in some of the tribes. We'll talk about this, inshallah, later. So Amr ibn Luhay, he was the leader of a very respected tribe and a very well-known and a powerful tribe in Arabia called Khuza'a. And he had a lot of power and he had a lot of victories. and he was very generous, and he was very kind and good to the people. And believe it or not, people looked up to Amr as someone who was religious. So when someone of his status and fame and reputation, who is loved by his people, brings in this ideology and this idol, people accepted it. That's the reality. And also keep in mind, as I mentioned, there is a long gap between the time of Amr ibn Luhay and the coming of Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam. We're talking thousands of years over here. So what happens to the message over time? It gets diluted. Yeah, people start taking it easier and easier. It gets looser and looser and looser. This is what time does, unfortunately. And there were basically no prophets. There was no guidance after Prophet Isa alayhi salam, and ignorance prevailed. Ignorance prevailed. And this is why Jahiliyyah was called Jahiliyyah, coming from Jahl, ignorance. It was the age of ignorance. And when you have ignorant people who are not aware of their own religion, it is very easy for such people to get manipulated. All you need is someone who has very fluent and eccentric and charismatic speech to attract the people and to get them reprogram their minds. That's what happens when you have no knowledge. And we have to be conscious of all of the above factors, because the reality of today, our religion today is being bombarded from every single directions. And we are all living it today, especially in the society. When you have Muslims even who come up with strange ethics and strange morals and strange ideology, to the point that they are willing to compromise their own deen and modify their own deen so that they can please a quote unquote more powerful and more advanced group of people. What causes people to do these things? Exact same three reasons. The exact same three reasons. People nowadays, unfortunately, I'm talking Muslims, for some reason, we feel a sense of inferiority compared to other civilizations. Yes, these countries may be first world countries. Yes, they may have the military power. Yes, they may have the best kind of education. But once again, that does not mean that they are morally correct. That does not mean that they are ethically correct. We have the Quran and the Sunnah, and we should be proud of this because we have the source of truth. Just because someone or a nation has more military power, that does not make them closer to the truth. And we also have people just like Amr ibn Luhay who are very important. They've been given leadership positions. They've been given fame, and they have a way with their speech, and they have education. They have all of these PhDs, and they will come and label themselves as the reformers of Islam. Once again, this is exactly this. Is this not Amr ibn Luhay in 2024? We have Amr ibn Luhay amongst us to this day, unfortunately. And the last and the saddest reason, unfortunately, ignorance. Most Muslims nowadays are ignorant of their own religion. They're ignorant of their own Sharia. They don't know the basic essentials of their deen. And as soon as they hear someone speaking in a very beautiful manner, in a very logical manner, they get swayed in all of these different ideologies. And it gets, anyways. So, back to the story. Amr ibn Luhay, he brought the first idol to Mecca and he placed it right in front of the Kaaba. And since that day, people started worshipping idols. And they had many practices around their idols, and they introduced a lot of pagan practices. And we're going to mention some of them. So, for example, of their practices, whenever they would travel somewhere, they would go and pray to the idol before they leave the city. It's the last thing they do before they leave the city. They go pray to the idol. And the first thing they do upon entering the city is go and pray to the idol. They would also sacrifice and slaughter meat in the name of the idol. And this is what Allah says in the Quran, وَلَا تَأْكُلُوا مِمَّا لَمْ يُذْكَرِ اسْمُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْهِ, reference to this kind of meat that is slaughtered in the name of the idols. And Allah also mentions وَمَا ذُبِحَ عَلَى النُّصُبِ. وَمَا ذُبِحَ عَلَى النُّصُبِ is this, the meat that has been slaughtered in the name of the idols. And they would dedicate a portion of this meat to their idols and another portion for Allah. So Quraysh actually believed in Allah. They believed in Allah. It's not that they didn't believe in Allah, but they associated partners. So they would dedicate a portion of the meat and the food to the idols and a portion to Allah Azza wa Jal. And Allah references in the Quran, Allah says, وَجَعَلُوا لِلَّهِ مِمَّا ذَرَأَ مِنَ الْحَرْثِ وَالْأَنْعَامِ نَصِيبًا فَقَالُوا هَذَا لِلَّهِ بِزَعْمِهِمْ وَهَذَا لِشُرَكَائِنَا. This is for Allah and this is for our idols. Of the practices that they would also do is something that is called al-istiqsamu bil-azlam. And Allah references in the Quran, وَأَن تَسْتَقْسِمُوا بِالْأَزْلَامِ. All of this is haram. And what is al-azlam? It's, in a way, to phrase it very, very simply, a different form of heads or tails. You know how you flip a coin, heads or tails? This was their own tails. They had an arrow, a featherless arrow, and they would essentially throw it. And depending on the orientation that the arrow would land, it's like a yes or a no. And that's how they would base their decisions, like life decisions. Like, okay, if the arrow lands in this way, I'll go travel to this city, or I'll go and get married, or I'll do this, this, and that. But if it doesn't go this way and it lands in a different way, then I'll delay it until next year. So this is a pagan practice, and this is not allowed in Islam as well. Of the pagan practices that was also practiced is what we call fortune telling. You guys know what is fortune telling, right? Fortune telling and astrology. So fortune telling, takahun. The astrology is at-tanjim. At-tanjim. So fortune telling, basically what they had certain people who had a connection with the jinn. They had communication with the jinn. And the jinn would claim that we have the knowledge of the unseen. So someone basically essentially would go to a fortune teller and they would pay them money and they would ask, tell me what happens in the future. And then they would tell them the ilm al-ghayb. Of course, and this is nothing but lies. Yani. And astrology is exactly what today we call horoscopes. You guys know what is horoscopes? You guys see these posts on social media that, oh, if you are born on September, on this day, whatever, if you are a Virgo or a Cancer or whatever, then yani, this month is going to be your lucky month. Or something bad is going to happen to you. This is exactly what astrology is, Tanjim. They would look at the alignment of the planets and the stars and they would say, oh, today's going to be a good day, today something bad is going to happen to you. This is all false, and this was pagan practices. Of their practices was also something called at-tatayyur. At-tatayyur. And this is a word that the Quran uses multiple times. Allah says in Surah Yasin, قَالُوا إِنَّا تَطَيَّرْنَا بِكُمْ. What is tatayyur? It is literally coming from the word ta'ir. Ta'ir is what? Bird. So they would literally grab a bird and they would make it fly. And depending on the direction that the bird goes, they would determine either a sign of optimism or pessimism. So if the bird flies and goes to the right, they would say, you know, alhamdulillah, this is a good sign. Yani we're proceeding the right way. This is their istikhara, basically. They would throw this bird. But if it goes the other direction, then this is a negative sign. This is a sign of pessimism. Something bad is, this is bad luck essentially. So basically they introduced more superstitions. Of the things that they would also do, they began worshipping the stones of the Kaaba. The same stones that the Kaaba was built with, they would worship these stones. And whenever a caravan would leave Mecca, they would come and they would actually chip a stone from the Kaaba and they would take it with them. Basically, this is like their portable idol with them in their travel. And they would worship this stone. And wherever they would go, they would put the stone and they would worship this stone. And by the way, there's a very important side point here that I have to mention. As Muslims, the Kaaba itself, the structure of the Kaaba, the stones of the Kaaba are not holy. The stones of the Kaaba are not sacred. Kaaba is nothing but stones and clay. And believe it or not, do you think the Kaaba that is standing today is the same Kaaba of Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, is the same Kaaba of Quraysh? Who knows when the last renovation was? Yeah, very recent, like 15 years ago or so, or maybe 20 years ago or so, right? So believe it or not, every 10 or 20 years, they actually go, like the foundations of the Kaaba grow old. They go weakened. They need to renovate the Kaaba. So they destroy the Kaaba and they put new stones and new foundations for the Kaaba. So the Kaaba itself is not holy. The silk that is covering the kiswa of the Kaaba is nothing but silk. It's a cloth. There is nothing sacred or holy about it. The marble floor of the Kaaba, the beautiful marble floor that you see today, it's nothing but marble floor. And unfortunately, to this day, if you ever go, I just got back from there like less than a month, like just a month ago or so. I was there, and subhanallah, you see so much ignorance from the Muslim Ummah, 2024. People doing strange things to the cloth of the Kaaba, weird things with the stones of the Kaaba. Subhanallah, it's very sad and very disgusting in a way. Subhanallah, you would be surprised that you would see close to the Kaaba there is forms of shirk taking place. And this is the sad reality. But we have to understand this. The location is sacred and holy. The haram is sacred and holy. The stones of the Kaaba are nothing but stones. Is that clear? So, and we have some narrations from Sahaba that later accepted Islam. We have the narration from Abu Raja al-Utaridi. He mentions, and this is a narration from Sahih Muslim, that before Islam, he says, كنا نعبد الحجر فإذا وجدنا حجرا هو أخير منه ألقيناه وأخذنا الآخر. We would worship a piece of stone. And if while we are traveling, we find a better looking stone, a shinier, nicer stone, we would throw away the old stone and we would grab the new stone and we would start worshiping that stone. And if we are not able to find stones, فإن لم نجد حجرا جمعنا جثوة من تراب ثم جئنا بالشاة فحلبناه عليه ثم طفنا به. If we didn't find stones, we would gather some sand, a pile of sand, and we would squeeze some milk out of the goat on this pile so that we make it firm, and we would go make tawaf around the sand. Jahiliyyah. This is Jahiliyyah. And subhanallah, you would think that intelligent people would never do this. That, this is Jahiliyyah, 1,400 years ago. Now, today, alhamdulillah, we're advanced. We don't do this. The sad reality is this is actually still present in some societies. In some countries, and I'm not going to name any countries, you go in the middle of the street of some countries, or in certain areas as well, you go in some jungles, and you find like temples and a painted stone in the middle, and people are offering money, people are offering sacrifices, meat, food, praying to the stone. To this day, 2024, a person with an intelligence and a brain is lowering his head to a piece of stone. This is found to this day. Don't think Jahiliyyah is gone. And even, subhanAllah, you find some derivations of such practices even amongst the Muslims. You will find people making tawaf around the graves of righteous people, or making sujood to graves of righteous people. And subhanAllah, where did La ilaha illallah go? This is exactly what Jahiliyyah is. And it is narrated later on that when Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he conquered Mecca, there were 360 idols around the Kaaba. Various shapes and sizes. There were big ones and there were small ones. Some of them looked like humans. Some of them looked like animals. And the majority of them were half human, half animals. Similar to the pictures you see in like the Greek and the Roman, what do they call it? The Egyptian structure, what do they call it? The Sphinx? The Sphinx. Half lion, half cat, something like that. I don't know. or what do they call it? The centaur, half horse, half human, something like you guys know what I'm talking about. Those pictures, right? So they had these images, they had these idols in these kind of shapes, and Quraysh also had the belief that Allah Azza wa Jal had daughters, astaghfirullah, and they would say that his daughters were the angels. They would say that his daughters were the angels, so they would also worship the angels, and they would basically have pictures of the angels. Paganism, the paganism and worshiping idol worship, they don't have a aqidah. They don't have a creed. Unlike the Muslims. The Muslims, we have a sharia, we have a creed, we have foundations. Paganism does not have that. And to this day, there are some paganistic religion. Best, if, for example, take a look at the Hindu. The Hindu today, if you go and ask 10 different Hindus, who are you worshiping? They will give you 10 different answers. Because every one of them is worshiping a different God. They don't have a aqidah. They don't have a unified aqidah like Muslims do. You can literally have 10 million Hindu worshiping 10 million gods. That's how it is. And all of them have a different understanding and a belief of what a God can do and what a God cannot do. Similarly, the Arabs, they also did not have a aqidah. So every Arab had a different understanding. Some of them would believe there is a day of judgment. Some of them, they didn't believe there's a day of judgment. So they have different beliefs. But one thing that they all agreed upon is that we have to worship these idols because these idols will bring us closer to Allah. This was their understanding. Now, was the entire society of Arabs worshipping idols? Were all of the Arabs pagans and worshipping idols? The answer is no. Ibn Ishaq mentions in his books, or Ibn Hisham rather, he mentions that Ibn Ishaq mentions a handful of exceptions that of certain individuals who did not fall, despite this very, so much ignorance, they did not fall into paganism. And it is beneficial for us to look into what each one of these individuals and to derive some benefits from them. The books of Seerah, they refer to them as the Hunafa. Hunafa is the plural of the word Hanif, someone who is turning away from shirk and turning towards Allah Azza wa Jal. This is what Hanif means. Who were the Hunafa? There were 4 individuals specifically mentioned who were from amongst Quraysh. Of them is a man by the name of Qus ibn Sa'ida. Qus ibn Sa'ida. And we don't have much information about him, only a few paragraphs about him. He was from the tribe of Banu Iyad, which is today modern Oman or Bahrain, So he was not from Quraysh. And he was an old man, and Prophet Muhammad, he met him when he was still a very young man. And Qus would come during Hajj season. As I mentioned, Hajj was still a ritual. People would perform Hajj. Arabs would still come to Mecca so they can perform Hajj. And he would preach against idolatry. So this man would come and he would actually preach the people to stop worshipping idols. And he was a very eloquent speaker or a poet. And he had there's a style of poetry, or you could say it's a form of speech, that is called in Arabic rajz, which is to preach against something. So he would do rajz against paganism and idolatry. So he would remind them of what happened. So, I brought some of the poetry that he wrote down. So he would say, for example, يا أيها الناس اسمعوا وعوا وإذا سمعتم فانتفعوا. Oh my people, listen to me and understand. And when you hear, then benefit. إن من عاش مات ومن مات فات وكل ما هو آت آت. Because whoever lives, they will surely die. And whoever dies, it's over for him. And everything that Allah has decreed will surely happen. يا معشر إياد أين ثمود وعاد وأين الآباء والأجداد. O people of Iyad, the tribe of Iyad, where are Thamud and Ad? Where are your fathers and your forefathers? أين المعروف الذي لم يشكر والمنكر الذي لم ينكر. Who will reward the one who does good and who will, but was not rewarded? Who will reward the one who does good but it has not been rewarded? And who will punish the person who has done evil but was not punished? Meaning he's telling them, do you think this is it? Do you think this life that you're living right now, that khalas, this is it? That there is no hereafter? That there is no hisab? That there is no judgment? أقسم قص بالله إن لله دينا أرضى من دينكم هذا. I swear, Qus swears by Allah that there must be a religion better than the religion you are upon. But of course, Qus, he did not know what that religion was, because this was happening before Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And it is narrated that many years later, during the 9th year of Hijrah, during the Am al-Wufud, the year of the delegations, when the Banu Iyad came to accept Islam, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked about him. He was like, where is Qus? Where is Qus ibn Iyad? And they said, oh, that guy, he died a very long time ago. And so Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, I used to remember him. He was riding on a red camel and he had very mesmerizing speech. Can anyone remind me of it? And so they would tell him of all of this poetry that that I just mentioned to you. Ibn Ishaq also narrates, before the coming of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Quraysh used to hold a very big festival so that they can commemorate and celebrate their idols, and they would do this outside of Mecca. So every year they had this festival where all of Mecca would actually leave Mecca and they would spend a few days outside. They were just celebrating these idols. They would go and they would do, certain activities. They would slaughter meat to the idols. They would go and do tawaf. They would do certain things. So one year, when the entire city of Mecca left, 4 people stayed behind. And all of them, the 4 people, saw each other. And as soon as they saw each other, they realized they're on the same wavelength. That they don't believe what the people are doing. They're not with the religion of their people. That they didn't want to go to this festival and take part in these pagan practices, so they stayed behind. So what did they do? They saw each other and decided to befriend one another. They befriended one another, and of course they kept it a secret amongst each other that they did not agree with the way of Quraysh and the way of the Arabs. Who are these 4 people? We're going to talk about them one by one. The first one is a familiar name for someone who has read the Seerah. Waraqa ibn Nawfal ibn Asad. Waraqa ibn Nawfal. Who is Waraqa ibn Nawfal? Perhaps if I mention this name, it will click a little bit more. Khadija binti Khuwaylid ibn Asad. Now, Waraqa is the cousin of Khadija radiyallahu anha. But Waraqa is around 40, 50 years older than Khadija. So they had this age gap. The second person, his name is Ubaydillah ibn Jahsh. Ubaydillah ibn Jahsh, he is the cousin of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam from his mother's side. So the daughter of Abdul Muttalib, the aunt of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, her son was Ubaydillah. The third person is a person by the name of Uthman ibn al-Huwayrith. Uthman ibn al-Huwayrith. And the fourth, his name is Zayd ibn Amr ibn Nufayl. And Zayd ibn Amr ibn Nufayl is the cousin of Umar ibn al-Khattab ibn Nufayl. And he is also way older than Umar. He's around 50, 40 years older than Umar. So these 4 people, they saw each other and they said, let's befriend one another and let us not tell the people about our affair. We know that the people are upon misguidance, that they have abandoned the original religion of Ibrahim. Like, what are our people doing? They're making tawaf around stones, and they were doing sujood to an idol, and they were giving meat and offerings to a statue that will neither benefit them nor harm them. Let us go and search for the original religion of Ibrahim, for the Hanifiyya, right? Because and Allah calls Ibrahim Hanifan, and Allah calls Ibrahim in several verses of the Quran. Because the Arabs knew that Ibrahim was a Hanif. So these 4, they wanted to search for the Hanifiyya. So what did they do? The 4 of them, they split up. And all of them had their own journey of searching for the truth. We'll start with the first person. As for Waraqa ibn Nawfal, Waraqa ibn Nawfal, he left Mecca and he actually accepted Christianity. So he traveled to Syria, he accepted Christianity, he studied the books of Christianity, he learned their languages, the Hebrew and whatever, and he obviously rejected the idolatry of Quraysh. When Prophet Muhammad got his first revelation, how old was Prophet Muhammad when he got his first revelation? Tell me? 40. When he was 40 years old, Waraqa was now an old man, an old blind man, around maybe 80 years old or so. And Waraqa was at this point back in Mecca, and he was very known. Now keep in mind, Quraysh was very uneducated. It was extremely rare to find someone who knows how to read and write. Very, very rare. They didn't have any culture, no civilization, no education, nothing. So Waraqa was now coming back to Quraysh. He's living in Quraysh, and he's someone who is well educated. He knows how to read, he knows how to write, he knows about the different cultures and the different religion. So to Quraysh, Waraqa was a genius. And this is why after the first revelation, and the famous story, which we'll mention a few weeks later, when Prophet Muhammad told Khadija, this is what I saw. I saw this, this creature coming from the sky, and I don't know what it is. Am I going crazy? Khadija doesn't know what this is. The Arabs don't know how to explain this because they don't know. They don't have this kind of knowledge. So she says, why don't I go to someone who has knowledge? Why don't I go to my own cousin, Waraqa ibn Nawfal? Because he knows, he's educated. So Khadija goes individually and she asks him and she tells him what has happened. So, and this is narrated by Ibn Hisham. And Waraqa, he tells Khadija, قدوس قدوس والذي نفس ورقة بيده إن كنت أصدقتني يا خديجة لقد جاءه الناموس الأكبر الذي كان يأتي لموسى. That I swear by the one whom my soul is in his hands, O Khadija, believe me when I say the same namus. Namus is like the keeper of secrets. So Waraqa is very intelligent. He realized while he's studying, there has to be some sort of communication between the creatures and the prophets. He just didn't know what it is. And he was very close. So he didn't know what to call it. He didn't know Jibreel. He didn't know angels. So he called it An-Namus, the keeper of secrets. The person the creature that communicates the secrets between the prophet and the creator. So he says, that's the Namus. The Namus, the same Namus that came to Musa and came to others. This is the same Namus that came to him. وَإِنَّهُ لَنَبِيُّ هَذِهِ الْأُمَّةِ And he is a prophet. So Khadija, she goes back and she tells Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ wants to go and speak to Waraqa. Like imagine now someone is telling him, he's explaining this phenomenon that happened to him. So he goes to Waraqa and he speaks to him. Once again, Waraqa explains himself and he says, وَالَّذِي نَفْسِي بِيَدِهِ إِنَّكَ لَنَبِيُّ هَذِهِ الْأُمَّةِ وَلَقَدْ جَاءَكَ النَّامُوسُ الْأَكْبَرُ الَّذِي جَاءَ مُوسَى وَلَا تُكَذَّبَنَّهُ وَلَا تُؤْذَيَنَّهُ وَلَا تُخْرَجَنَّهُ وَلَا تُقَاتَلَنَّهُ. That he told Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, I swear, the same words, I swear by the one whose soul is in his hand, whose my soul is in his hands. The Namus, the same Namus that came to Musa and others, has come to you. And you will surely be rejected. People will call you a liar. People will fight you. People will expel you. And at this Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he got shocked. Like insult you, whatever. They would mock you, whatever. They would reject you, whatever. But to expel you? So he says to him, my people will expel me? And Waraqa says, yes, your people will expel you, because no prophet who has come to preach the truth to his people, no prophet has come to preach the truth to his people except that he has been expelled by his own people. وَلَئِنْ أَنَا أَدْرَكْتُ ذَلِكَ الْيَوْمِ لَأَنْصُرَنَّ اللَّهَ نَصْرًا يَعْلَمُهُ. That he told him in a different narration, how I wish I was younger. Like imagine this, Waraqa is an old man when he's saying this. He's literally in the brink of his death. And he spent his whole life searching for the truth. And now he is hearing this man telling him, this is what I saw. He says, how I wish I could have been younger, and so I can be there to support you and support the deen of Allah Azza wa Jal. And it is mentioned in narrations, narrated by Aisha, that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he says, رأيته في المنام وعليه ثياب بيض ولو كان من أهل النار لرأيت عليه ثيابا غير ذلك. That Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he says, I saw Waraqa in a dream. Waraqa was before Islam. Well, technically Jibreel had already come down, but it was before prophethood. Okay? But Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, I saw Waraqa in a dream and he was wearing white clothing. And had he been of the people of Jahannam, I would have seen him wearing something else. And in a different narration by Az-Zuhri, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he says, رَأَيْتُ لِوَرَقَ جَنَّةً أَوْ جَنَّتَيْنِ. I saw Waraqa enjoying one or two gardens in Jannah. Meaning, and by the way, Waraqa passed away barely 2 weeks after this conversation. So, even though nowadays it is very well known, when people ask who is the first convert in Islam, they say, oh, Abu Bakr. Well, technically the more correct answer is Waraqa ibn Nawfal. Because before Prophet Muhammad ﷺ even became a Rasul, Waraqa believed in him. And he said, if I were able to, I would fight with you and stand with you to the very end. He told him, you are a prophet. You are a prophet. So this is Waraqa ibn Nawfal, not to stretch the story too long. The second person, Ubaydullah ibn Jahsh. Ubaydullah, he also converted to Christianity. And since he was the cousin of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, so Ubaydullah also returned back to Mecca. When Prophet Muhammad ﷺ preached Islam, Ubaydullah, he accepted Islam. And he married a lady by the name of Ummi Habiba. Ummi Habiba. And they both migrated to Abyssinia with a group of Muslims later on. But in Abyssinia, Ubaydullah reverted back to Christianity. So he abandoned Islam. And because he abandoned Islam, of course, Ummi Habiba was forced to leave him. She could not stay with someone who was not a Muslim. And he died shortly after that as a Christian in Abyssinia. And so Ummi Habiba was basically single by herself, and Prophet Muhammad sent her a proposal through An-Najashi, and he married her. We'll talk about her story many weeks later, inshallah. The third person, Uthman ibn al-Huwayrith. Uthman ibn al-Huwayrith, he accepted Christianity and he would never return to Mecca. He became a Christian, he never returned to Mecca. He remained a Christian until he died. And to be honest, from what I read, it is not very clear whether even the message of Islam got to him or not. And it is mentioned that he arrived to the palace of the Caesar of Rome. So he made his way up to Syria, up to the Roman Empire. And he built his reputation. He had a very high position. He had a lot of prestige. He had a very good reputation. He had the Caesar gave him a lot of money. He was the interpreter of the Caesar, because the Caesar of Rome, he did not speak Arabic, and he needed an interpreter, someone who spoke Arabic, and this was Uthman ibn al-Huwayrith. As for Zayd ibn Amr ibn Nufayl, he has a very, very interesting story. Zayd ibn Amr, he also studied Christianity. He studied Judaism, the Jewish religion, but he did not accept any of them because he was not impressed with them. It is narrated that he went to Seerah and he studied, and he would argue with the Christian and the Jewish priests and rabbis, and he would tell them, your religion is not the religion of Ibrahim, and you know it. And so he returned back to Mecca, not having accepted any other religion. And Asma binti Abi Bakr, she narrates the story. And Asma, of course, who is Asma binti Abi Bakr? Asma is the daughter of Abu Bakr Siddiq, the sister of Aisha radiallahu anha. And Aisha was way younger than her. Asma was around 20 years older than or so. So Asma is saying that I saw Zayd with his back leaning against the Kaaba. And he was telling the people, and of course Zayd was at this point very mature and very well respected. وَالَّذِي نَفْسِ زَيْدٍ بِيَدِهِ مَا أَصْبَحَ مِنْكُمْ أَحَدٌ عَلَى دِينِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ غَيْرِهِ. Oh Allah, he would say, by the one, I swear by the one whom my soul is in his hand, none of you, there is nobody at this moment upon the religion of Ibrahim except for me. None of you guys are worshipping the religion of Ibrahim except for me. And he would say, he would make a dua, Asma narrates this, Oh Allah, if only I would know of the most beloved way for me to worship you, I would have done it, but I don't know it. So he would do whatever he thought was the way to worship Allah, because he didn't know. He came before Prophet Muhammad sallallahu and Asma would also narrate, I would remember seeing Zayd rebuke the Quraysh for worshipping idols and for for giving meat to their idols, and also for burying their daughters. So this is something we didn't mention about the Jahiliyyah. The people of Quraysh giving birth to a girl was a source of shame to the family, because the one who holds the family name is the man, not the lady. So a man was a sort of source of pride. A lady was a source of shame. And some of them would go and bury their daughters alive. This is mentioned in the Quran. They would go and hide from the people. It was a matter of embarrassment and shame. And they would take their baby girls and bury her alive. And so Zayd would come and he would actually ask them, give me this daughter of yours. If you're not going to take care of her, if you want to bury her, give her to me. I'm going to take care of her. I'm going to raise her. So Zayd would actually collect all of these daughters, and he would raise them, and he would never participate in any idolatry. He never also prostrated to an idol. And it is authentically narrated, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ met Zayd when he was just maybe a teenager or so, before becoming a prophet. And it is mentioned that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he asked him, Ma sha'nuk? Like, what's the matter between you and your people? Like, why are you guys always disagreeing? Always, like, what's this clash in ideology between you guys? And Zayd, he responded to him and he says, I can't do what these people are doing. I can't worship idols. I don't believe what they're doing is true. And of course, this mindset resonated with Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Why? Because even our Prophet was someone who never prostrated to an idol. And he never agreed to their religion. So he found kind of a similar mindset in front of him through Zayd. But Zayd passed away before the message of Islam. His son is someone whom we should all know, inshallah. His name is Sa'id ibn Zayd. Who is Sa'id ibn Zayd? Who can tell me? Ashran Mubashara. He is one of the 10 who is promised Jannah, subhanAllah. Unfortunately, many people nowadays, they don't know about him. But one time he went to Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and he asked him, O Prophet of Allah, you remember my father. You spoke to my father. You know what he was like and what he was upon. What is the fate of my father Zayd? And Prophet Muhammad ﷺ told him, Zayd ibn Amr would be resurrected on the day of judgment as his own ummah. So this is a trivia question. If anyone asks you can ask this to someone. Who is the one person who will be resurrected as his own ummah? A one-man ummah. That is Zayd ibn Amr ibn Nufayl. So, anyways, all of this so far is talking about pagans of Arabia. What's the time? Okay, we'll go a little bit longer. All of this is about the pagans of Arabia. How about the other religions in the world at the time? What were the other major religions of the world at the time? So at the time, there were other religions as well. There was Judaism, meaning the Jewish people. There were the Christians. There were the Zoroastrians. You guys know what Zoroastrians are? Zoroastrians are the fire worshippers. In Arabic, the Majus. The Majus. They worship fire. So in a way, it's also a form of paganism, you know. And the Sabians, or in Arabic it is called As-Sabi'un. As-Sabi'un. So these were the main religions that were found essentially in the world. As-Sabi'un, they have a very weird religion. They worship the angels. They glorify the suns and the stars and the planets. So they have a very weird, and they were not big compared to the other religion. The Christians were mainly found in certain areas of Yemen and in the Roman Empire as well. So areas of Syria, Asham, and Abyssinia. The Jewish people were mainly found in Yemen and in certain scattered parts of Arabia. The Zoroastrians, the fire worshippers, that was Persia, the Persian Empire, Iran, basically. And the Sabians were found in areas in Iraq. Now, as for the Jewish people, let's talk a little bit about each of these religions and then we'll wrap up, inshallah. I don't mean to take too much time. As for the Jewish people, Because we need to understand, where did everyone come from? Like, where did the Jews come from? Because when we study the Seerah, we know, okay, there were the Jewish people in Khaybar, there were the Jewish people in Medina, right? The tribes of Jews. Where did they come from? So we study a little bit. I'm not going to give you the whole boring backstory, and inshallah, if you want to go and read the full details, you can go and read the books for full details, inshallah. So as for the Jewish people, the scholar mentioned that there were two main, two waves of migration, for lack of a better word. There were two waves of migration that caused the Jews to migrate to the lands of Arabia. Two waves, two major events that took place. The first wave was at the time of the conquest of Babylon and Assyria. Babel, yeah. And this was in the year 587 before Christ. So this is long time ago, way before Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, way before Isa alayhi salam, right? So we're talking probably 1,000 years before Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And a king invaded the Babylon, and his name was Bukht Nasr. Bukht Nasr. And he conquered what is known today as the modern day Palestine, essentially. And he destroyed the Haykal of Sulaiman. So Prophet Sulaiman, he built this amazing structure, the Haykal. Bukht Nasr, he destroyed this Haykal, and he caused destructions to a lot of the Jews who were living in this land. So this caused a mass migration of the Jews from the land of Sham, Palestine, to southern Arabia, to the land of Yemen. And this is why to this day actually, you'll find in Yemen there are certain areas which are still Jewish, and they are descendants of these original Jewish people who came in this wave. This is the first wave. The second wave is another conquest actually of the modern day Palestine, but it's a different conquest this time. This time it happened at the hands of a king called King Titus, King Titus of the Roman Empire. And this was in the year 70 after Christ. And he did something similar to Bukht Nasr. He came in, he despised the Jewish people, so he killed the Jewish people, he destroyed their temples, he caused corruption, and once again the Jews were forced to migrate from to the region of Hijaz. And so these people, they settled in different locations. Some of them, they settled up in the north. Some of them, a little bit up to the north, like the people of Khaybar. Those were the people known later as Khaybar. Some of them settled a little bit to the south. These were the tribes which would later be known as Banu Nadir, Banu Qurayza, and Banu Qaynuqa'. And some of them continued south even more, and they joined the big group of Jews who were down in Yemen. And in fact, for a bulk of time, the Yemen, for a duration of time, was ruled by Jewish kingdoms. So, for example, there's the famous kingdom of Himyar, which would later be known as the tribes of Himyar. But the kingdom of Himyar, one of the famous kings that you should take note about is someone, his name is Dhu Nuwas. Dhu Nuwas. He invaded the Christians of Najran. Najran is a little bit to the north of Yemen, south of Mecca. And so he invaded the Christians and he ordered them to become Jewish. And when they refused, he ordered the digging of a massive pit of fire, Al-Ukhdud. And he burnt tens of thousands of men and women and children. And this story is recorded to this day in Surah Al-Buruj, Ashab al-Ukhdud. This was him. So these are the Jewish people. Who were the Christians? Christianity was mainly found in Rome. Like I said, the Roman Empire. So what happened to Christianity essentially after Prophet Isa alayhi salam? To make a very long story short, after Allah Azza wa Jal raised Prophet Isa alayhi salam, for a few decades there were two major branches of Christianity left. One of them the scholars refer to as the Jewish Christianity, and the second was called Pauline Christianity. Okay, and the Jewish Christians, they believed that they were in Arabic, the Jewish Christians. So just literally translated into Arabic. يعني the what do you call it? يعني اليهود no النصرانية اليهودية يعني. Because why are they called like this? Is what the scholars call them. Because they also believe that they were Jews. They believe that they inherited the Sharia from the Jewish people, and they believe that they had to follow the Sharia of Musa alayhi salam. And so they believe they had a Sharia. They have something called, they don't call it halal meat, they call it kosher meat. They believed in something like, for example, circumcision. Like Islam, we believe in circumcision. And they believed that Isa, Jesus, was sent to them to the Jews as the promised Messiah. This is exactly what we believe as Muslims. This is exactly what we believe as Muslims, by the way. These were the Jewish Christians. And there was another sect that were called the Pauline Christians, following this man. His name is Paul. And from this kind of Christianity is where we get all the different branches of Christianity that you see today. The Orthodox and the Catholic and all of these things, they're all descendants of the Pauline Christians. Why? Who is he? So who is Paul? Paul is someone who pretended to be a disciple. The story is found in books of history. He pretended to be a disciple, and he claimed that he had a ru'ya, a vision, where he saw Isa alayhi salam. And that Isa told him that he is a divine being, and he is not a human being, he's a divine being, that he has an element of divinity. So Paul came to his people, and it's a very similar trend to Amr ibn Luhay. Paul, very respected, very well known, this and that. He came to his people, and he came to replace the law, the Sharia. So basically, he told them, if you believe in Jesus, you don't have a Sharia. So, and then he came up with a lot of things which are found in Christianity today. He came up with the Trinity. He came up with the 25th of December. He came up with the Son of God, and all of these different things. They all come from this man, Paul. And for a number of years, for around 300 years since then, the Christians debated which one of us is the correct branch. Is it the Jewish Christians or the Pauline Christian? Who is Jesus? Is Jesus a God? Is he a man? Is he a prophet? Is he the son of a God? What is the Bible? This and that. Until the Romans, and the Romans at this point in time, I hope I haven't lost you at this point. The Romans at that time, they were not Christian yet. They were pagans, and they hated the guts of the Christians. They would persecute the Christians. They would torture them. They would, in fact, burn Christians, and they would use them as street lights. That's how badly they persecuted the Christians, until the Christians experienced what they call a miracle. And maybe in a way it is a miracle. That Roman emperor, the same pagan empire that hates Christians, the Roman emperor converted to Christianity. Constantine, he converted to Christianity. Like that's me today telling you, Justin Trudeau accepted Islam, and he's in the south of Israel saying his Shahada. It's crazy to think about, So, but Constantine didn't want to play no games, no debates, nothing. So he brought everyone, Pauline Christians, Jewish Christians. He said, we're going to settle this right now, right here and now, which is the correct branch. And keep in mind, Constantine was coming from a pagan background. So he wanted a version of Christianity that appealed to parts of paganism. Which of these do you think fit the criteria? The Pauline Christians. So he accepted the Pauline Christianity. He said, this is the correct version of Christianity. What did he do to the other version of Christianity? The exact same thing that he did before he accepted Christianity. Let's kill all the Jewish Christians. Let's burn their temples, burn their books, slaughter them, persecute them. So Jewish Christianity became almost extinct. And today it is extinct. There's no traces of Jewish Christianity today. And of the traces of Jewish Christianity that we get to learn from the Seerah is a story which I had hoped to be able to cover today, but it already took a little bit longer than I had hoped, is the story of Salman al-Farsi. Salman al-Farsi. And I had hoped to have time to go through the story. It's a very, very beautiful story. But the story of Salman, essentially, he's coming from a Persian background. He was a fire worshipper. His father was a fire worshipper. He meets a monk who was upon Jewish Christianity. He converts to that Christianity. He goes from temple to temple to temple to temple, right? And then the last monk that he meets, what does he tell him? Once that monk was about to die, the monk tells Salman, I don't know anyone else besides me and the people that you've met so far who are upon the correct version of Christianity. So this shows that Salman was upon a different version of Christianity than the rest of the Roman Empire. But this was the story of Salman. And then the story of conversion is, I think, well known. Yani he was captured, he was enslaved in Yathrib by a Jewish person. And then when Prophet Muhammad came, he went and he looked for the three signs. He was living in a land of dates. He was coming from the land of the Arabs, the three signs. So he was from a land of dates. There was the seal of prophethood, and that the prophet does not accept charity; he only accepts gifts. These were the three signs, and Salman found all of these signs. And so this is like a very 2-minute summary of Salman's conversion story. I recommend you listen to the full story. It's a very, very beautiful story. So this was the Christianity, and Persians were upon the fire worshipping, and there's the Sabi'un, as I had mentioned. So these were the religions of the world at this point in time. The world was literally in utter darkness. You have pagans who were deluded because they thought they were upon the religion of Ibrahim, but in reality they are as far as possible from the Sharia of Ibrahim alayhi salam. You have the Jewish people who have not only changed and modified the religion, but they have used it as a form of feeling superior, as a source of arrogance in front of other civilizations. And the rabbis would use and they would purposely hide the Jewish knowledge so that they can make money. So it was completely corrupted. The Jewish faith was completely corrupted. And you have Christianity, which became so changed and malformed to the point where now they associate a human being with Allah, even though Isa never ever preached that before. And you have Zoroastrianism, you have Sabianism, and all other forms of idol worshipping. This was the world before Islam. This is the age of darkness, the age of Jahiliyyah. In the middle of this dark and hopeless and evil world, Allah sent down a glimmer of hope, a source of light and a guidance for mankind. Someone who was sent to transform this darkness into a light. This was our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Prophet Muhammad, he says in a Sahih narration, ألا إن ربي أمرني أن أعلمكم ما جهلتم مما علمني يومي هذا. My Lord has sent me and He has commanded me to teach you that what you were ignorant about. وإن الله تعالى نظر إلى أهل الأرض فمقتهم عربهم وعجمهم إلا بقايا من أهل الكتاب. And Allah looked at the whole world at the time, and He greatly despised and He hated everyone because of Jahiliyyah, idolatry, paganism, except for small remnants of people of the book, like Salman al-Farisi, like some of the Hunafa. This is why we call it Jahiliyyah, ignorance, utter ignorance. This is why Prophet Muhammad ﷺ came as a nur, as a rahmatan lil alameen. Why? Because after his coming, there will never ever be an age of Jahiliyyah. There will never be an age of ignorance. So, what do we learn from all of the above that we have mentioned? We'll summarize, a few benefits. My style of teaching Seerah, I don't just like to narrate the incidents and just historical facts. The whole point of learning Seerah, in my opinion, is to derive benefits that we can apply in our day-to-day lives. Nowadays, we are living in a society and a community which is pressuring us to change our morals and perhaps to even change aspects of our religion, just so that it can conform to the norms of society. Whether we're talking about LGBT or we're talking about something else, but we realize guidance only and only comes from Allah Azza wa Jal. Guidance does not come from the intelligence of mankind. Guidance does not come from the rationalization and the logic and the philosophy of mankind. Because there was an era between Isa and Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, where there were no prophets, yet no intellectual, no philosopher, not a single human being in the world could guide mankind. Even if all of them put their heads together, they could not come up with something that would unite mankind, something that would guide mankind. Then Allah revealed the Quran. Then the guidance came. And mankind always believes, subhanAllah, it's the sunnah of mankind, that progression comes from the experiences of the previous people. That, oh, our fathers, they didn't allow these things, practices in the 60s. Nowadays, we're smarter, we're more progressive, we're more open. So we're going to allow what our fathers didn't allow. And the next generation is going to say, they're not going to allow what you allow today. And it goes on and on and on. As Muslims, our guidance and our morals is purely coming from Allah and the Sunnah. This is ultimate guidance without changing it to the desires and the norms of society. Mankind could not achieve guidance until Allah Azza wa Jal chose to reveal down the guidance. Not even our Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Allah says about our Prophet, وَوَجَدَكَ ضَالًّا فَهَدَى. We found you astray. You were lost. Then we guided you. مَا كُنْتَ تَدْرِي مَا الْكِتَابُ وَلَا الْإِيمَانِ. You did not know what the book is. You did not know what Iman is until we taught you, until we showed you. Even when our Prophet, as we're going to mention, he used to sit in the cave of Hira, contemplating. He did not know the truth until Jibreel came down. So we learn from all of these things. Who today is going to come from amongst the philosophers or of the modern reformers or of the whatever theologians that we can somehow, as men, as mankind, sit together in a room and have a discussion and come up with a form of guidance that will guide mankind? This is ridiculous. Mankind can only be told what to do through a higher power. Period. That's it. And most of mankind, and we are all witnesses this, most of mankind are blind followers. Most of mankind are blind followers. They follow whatever the people are doing, like the people of Quraysh. They knew what they're doing is wrong. They're prostrating to an idol, to a stone. Ibrahim never did this. Amr ibn Luhay. But because everyone else was doing it, we're going to do it as well. And Allah Azza wa Jal, He says in the Quran, وَمَا أَكْثَرُ النَّاسِ وَلَوْ حَرَصْتَ بِمُؤْمِنِينَ. Most of mankind, they will not be believers in Allah Azza wa Jal, even if you want them to be. And Allah says, وَإِن تُطِعْ أَكْثَرَ مَنْ فِي الْأَرْضِ يُضِلُّكَ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. If you obey and follow the majority of people on earth, they will cause you to go astray. Why? Because the majority of people, they don't want Sharia. They don't want halal and haram. They don't want pray 5 times a day. They don't want someone to tell me what to do. They don't want a book that tells me what I can do, what I cannot do. As Muslims, this Sharia and laws and halal and haram are source of guidance for us. This is how we gain our success in both the dunya and the akhirah. And from the stories of some of the stories of Hunafa, the stories of Salman, the story of Zayd bin Amr, we learn that also whoever is sincere, even if it is someone living in the worst and in the darkest of times and in the darkest of societies, the people, anyone who truly wants guidance, Allah will surely guide them. Even if they have no prophet, even if they have no book, even if they have nothing. Someone who desires actual, genuine guidance, Allah will surely guide them. Therefore, whatever society that you live in, whether you are surrounded by idols, whether you are surrounded by Islamophobia, whether you are surrounded by LGBT flags, whatever it is, if you have goodness in you and you are sincere in wanting to seek out guidance from Allah Azza wa Jal, then Allah will surely guide you. Inshallah, in the next week, we will, I skipped a section of the book. I didn't mean to skip it. I just meant to, I think this is a better order. We're going to talk about the lineage of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and then begin our actual incidents. We're going to talk about the Ashabul Fil and whatnot, and certain incidents that took place. Inshallah, that will be taking place next week. I apologize, I took longer, way longer than I had hoped to take. But I hope, I ask Allah to make these lectures a source of benefit for everyone, and ask Allah to grant me sincerity in all of my lectures. Barakallahu li wa lakum. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك